This one's on your MCR July 2017 assignment and the optional task 1, which is about internal communications. Now, as MCR students, you're very aware of the fundamental importance of employees because we start our focus from inside the organization before we go outside. If you don't get the internal context of the organization aligned, however much you do your external comms to build your reputation, external activity is going to be fruitless. So it's very important that we understand this deeply and we show that in the way we present our case to the examiner. But let's understand the link between internal communication, employee relations, and employee engagement and reputation. Now, at the heart of an HR strategy, we require the ultimate achievement of an engaged set of employees. A set of employees who are engaged with the brand, the values of the organization, and the activities of an organization. We call it an engaged workforce. It's a dream to achieve. Now, to achieve a great engaged workforce, you need employee relations, which is predominantly driven by HR, but in this case, marketers at a strategic level need to be concerned about. Now, to achieve employee relations, you need internal communications. So, in summary, internal communications are important in employee relations, and employee relations, when done strategically over a period of time, is going to create an engaged workforce, and that together can have a significant impact on your overall corporate reputation. So understand the link. Now, to conceptually to understand internal communication and the subject of employee relations, you got to spend some quality time on chapter 10 on your MCR textbook. Without that theoretical knowledge, you're going to grope in the dark, and that's going to be a failure. On top of that, you're going to go to the conceptual discussions by Crisfield, by Frombrun, by Davis, and get all the relevant concepts of employee relations, employee engagement, internal communications into an area that you can evaluate what's going to be relevant for this assignment. So that's the theoretical review that you need to do before you start this. Secondly, you got to understand what's happening around the world. The benchmark companies who are setting the standards of how employee relations and how the employee engagement can be revolutionized. So look at case studies like Zappos. Understand how they build a culture centered around the employees. Look at Southwest. How do they recruit the right candidates? Look at the traditional examples like 3M. How do they create a culture of innovation through employee relations, employee engagement? There are so many case studies that can give you the current practices that are in these companies. What about companies like Netflix, who doesn't have a leave policy? And they used it effectively to manage a group of employees when they were in the physical stage of DVD rentals, Blu-ray rentals. Look at case studies like Google and how do they create the employee engagement in their organization. So much available online, example on YouTube, and so much case studies available. If you don't bring this content and your current and applied knowledge, you're not going to score marks in this assignment. So step 1 is your task, which is the first task, is to understand the concept of employee relationships. You've got to show that using illustrative examples. So it's very clear what you need to do. So at the start of it, you will establish what the link between employee relations, employee engagement, internal communication, and reputation. And it's important for you to bring the models in that shows the link of these factors to reputation. You got to establish that. Then it's up to you to come up with multiple aspects of employee relations. The examiner has given you about 3 areas in the guideline. He's talked about roles, behaviors, symbols, and communication. So pick 2. And then bring out examples through a benchmark study how companies have achieved that. How companies have achieved effective communications. And in communications, if you read chapter 10, you will realize There's upward, downwards, lateral, formal, informal, different types of communications you need to foster effectively for your organization to achieve proper employee relations. What about the climate of your company's communication? Does it create biased communication or open, transparent, two-way communication? So bring in the concepts and illustrative examples to establish and showcase different dimensions to the subject of employee relations. In task 2, you have to do a clear audit, and that requires the necessary tools. So chapter 10 again sets the foundation on the tools that you could use. But don't just limit it to your textbook. Go and look at some of the great case studies, some other writing, and establish about 5 to 6 tools that you're going to use for you to figure out the strengths and weaknesses in your company with regard to communication. It could be in your communication climate, it could be in behaviors. Example, CSR behaviors. How does the company engage employees into the CSR activities? Could you benchmark how other companies do that and showcase where your company is strong and weak? So think about a set of tools that you're going to use to analyze what your company does against some benchmark initiatives, and then find clearly what the strengths and the weaknesses are. This sets the platform for your third aspect, your recommendation. So look at a framework from an HR book, a case study, a company that uses a clear model for employee relations, resulting in employee engagement. In your case, finally linking it to the improvement of the reputation of the organization. When you do that, you can take one by one areas that requires attention. Example, the policy on reward and recognition, the policy on recruitment, the policy of issue resolution with employees, the policies and the practice. So again, benchmark the types of initiatives taken by other companies and come up with 4 to 5 strongly justified recommendations. And remember, as always, you got to bring in specific political and financial consequences that is relevant to some of the recommendations you're making. So if you're going to revamp your reward and recognition structure, including policy, where do you think some political resistance is going to come from based on what's happening in the company? If you're moving into variable pay, if you're moving into reward models such as bringing in the back-end staff also into some form of a recognition or reward program, does that require you to bring in more financial resources, which could also be a challenge? So you got to address some of those as well in each of your recommendations. And before I forget, all along, don't forget how companies react in crisis situations is also a great example of the way they look at employees. Some companies are very famous for laying off staff and going with the axe and knocking off their staff cadres first instance when there's a problem. But some companies take a very different approach. We've shared many examples in the class. Don't forget to bring in a little bit of crisis and how companies respond with regard to employees, and how employees, example in the case of Selinco, responded during a crisis, and how did that impact the overall company's reputation. Is an area you could touch in at the appropriate places. Don't forget to talk about the digital environment and how digital angle is used to engage employees and to improve employee relationships. Another aspect that could help you score more marks. So with all in all, it's a clear flow of a task. Starts with the concept of employee relations, but with great examples. An audit of what happens in your company, so the strengths and weaknesses are clear. At the end, it's about clear set of recommendations that could improve the issues found in the audit, plus go beyond and establish a strong employee relationship model, remember, which finally has to show how it improves the company's reputation in the lines of credibility, trustworthiness, reliability, and also in the area of responsibility.